Hey folks, it is March the 5th, and this is our dual credit 201 course. And so we're picking up where we left off last time, and that was, of course, the election of 1800. So we had President Adams, president number 2. He was very unpopular because of some of the steps he took to especially like erase people's First Amendment rights, but also to apply for political power by using the government to increase his own power. And well, that's kind of definition of corruption and tyranny, right? Using your office to improve yourself and hurt others. So we were talking about how the political campaign was very personal. It was ugly, or attacking one another, and it never happened again. So, hey, change you. Because it's shifted over from. Thing is, I converted it. Oh, that's the last one on this slide. I gotta get the other slide set up. My bad. Yeah, I was like, where is it going? Click, 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 click. No click. My bad. Yeah, I for some reason I have this one divided into like multiple. Into multiple slides. It's actually 3 slide sets. There it is.
No. Are you saying alligator food?
Alligator food, yeah.
I remember. Oh, never mind.
Hey kids, just FYI, as soon as we're done with the early Republic unit, we're going to have test number 2. So that's, I don't think it's going to be the week after spring break, but like not too long afterwards. All right, so you can't see it, but because the transitions are messed up on this, but behind the text has a picture of Aaron Burr. Hey, y'all gonna talk about the magic bag later. All right, so the election of 1800 continued. Hamilton once again tried to influence the election and talk electors into voting for a guy called Charles Pinckney instead of his fellow Federalist Adams. So John Adams and Hamilton, remember, they were friends, but Hamilton publicly criticized the president. And so the president fired some of his friends as in backlash. And so now you're having the Federalist Party split up. So, and every time that happens in a candidacy, if you remember your last semester, it doesn't end that well for the party that splits. So once again, Hamilton's schemes backfired. It turned out Democratic Republicans, Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, beat them. Unfortunately, Jefferson and Burr received the same amount of votes, leaving the House to decide who would be the victor. It took 6 days of delegation for them to decide Jefferson as the president and Burr as the vice president. This event led to the 12th Amendment, which requires separate balloting in the Electoral College for president and vice president. So that's all we got. Of course, next year, the government will go over the various amendments, unless you're taking it, and all that good stuff. So, because the Constitution originally came out with one methodology for how the vice president was picked, but they, of course, would have to change it because already President number 3 were having a problem with the Electoral College.
We always have a problem with Electoral College, whether we think we do or not.
Well, I mean, recent events we certainly have, especially when the race is really tight.
They kind of get to choose what happens with the country, huh? They kind of get to choose what happens with the country, huh?
Well,
if
yeah.
all of them are corrupt, what happens to keep them not corrupt?
Well, that's why it's supposed to be the state's responsibility to pick the right electors, right? And that's
What
where
if
the
the states are corrupt?
what can you do? Then your states are corrupt. Then it's up to you, the local individual, to try to fix it.
Then how do you do that?
Well, first you have the ballot box, and if that doesn't work, you have, what is it? It's the soap box, the ballot box, and the cartridge box. So first you got the soap box where you get up, you speak, you try to convince other people. Then you got the ballot box to vote. And if it becomes so corrupt that it's dangerous to you, that's when you're supposed to have the people stand up against it with force. So, kind of the order that the American Revolution went in. Yeah, always you gotta try to work within the system to change things up. It's corrupt officials, that's where election process has to come in. So we have to get in big candidates who are willing to fix whatever the problem is. Sometimes the problem's so big, it might need a constitutional amendment. Sometimes it's so small, you just gotta change somebody in that seat. Or influence whoever's there. Well, that's a good idea. If you have something like an issue that you're concerned with, that you email your representative, whether it's federal or state, and let them know, because they might not read your emails, and their aides might not read your emails, but they at least have somebody generally to scan to see what the issue is, to get a pulse on what an issue is. So it's a federal one. They might have like, hey, we got this month we got 5,000 emails regarding this issue. Maybe we should look at it. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next one.
Or else we'll be kicked out of office.
It could happen. All right, so as we mentioned before, the Supreme Court was one of those things that existed but didn't really have that much of a definition to it. But we're going to get that through essentially the self-empowering case of Marbury versus Madison. During their last days in office, the President Adams and his cabinet, the Federalist lame ducks freaked out. So a lame duck is somebody who's holding a political office, but their time's almost up. Those in Congress passed the Judiciary Act of 1801, which created 16 federal judgeships, 6 circuit courts, and lots of marshals and clerks. So
what are marshals and clerks?
all right, so clerk is somebody who handles essentially the paperwork and things like that, processing documents for the court system. Things like exchanging property, marriage certificates, fines. A marshal is essentially a law enforcement for court, and they do everything from make sure that the court is a safe place to also things like prisoner transportation, capturing escaped inmates. Things of that matter. So they don't do local police work. They try to do things essentially for the courts, right?
Yes.
So, let's see here. President Adams then rushed to fill these positions with other Federalists. So it's like, wow, I got all these new jobs. I'll put my friends in there before I'm out. So he was signing appointments all the way up into midnight of his last day in office. It fell upon his Secretary of State, John Marshall, to deliver these appointment letters to the new officials. Marshall was unable to deliver all the appointment letters before time ran out, but he did manage to receive his own, which made him Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Hooray! He's like, that's me. I got my own job ticket. And that's going to be a major source of power for the presidency through much of our history. It's not necessarily what the president could do, but what job he could give you in the federal government. So things like post office, cabinet positions within the courts. It's going to be lucrative. a lot of prestige to them as well. And because of that, you can help get in money and influence to help you become president or stay president. Now, one worry is if I stop showing these when I teach this class again, is I have to speak really slowly. Like if you ever go to like a college history lecture and they know you're all writing it down or typing it, it's like you say every sentence and you pause for like 10 seconds. And then you say the next sentence and you pause for 10 seconds. I don't know.
That would kill me.
I mean, you got to do it so everybody has time. So it'd be like, during their last days in office, the Federalist lame ducks freaked out. Those in Congress passed the Judiciary Act of 1801. This is like, I'm sorry, what was the last thing? Like,
Do you
okay.
want to practice on us?
No,
No.
no, he does not. Thank you.
Those in Congress. Headed way.
Yeah,
Those who keep talking like that may or may not die
well, you know,
tomorrow.
about less than 100 years ago, high schools, even here in Tyler, used to teach something called shorthand.
I wish they still taught us shorthand.
Yeah.
I would love a shorthand.
I had to develop my own form of it, basically a super hyper abbreviation whenever I was in college, because a lot of professors, they would just talk so fast. And so,
I can do it with writing. I'm pretty good with doing it with you.
I just write everything down.
You're the
That's
only
dangerous.
teacher I have to abbreviate for. Everyone else I can pretty much write down.
That's why I like using pen, because it's faster.
yeah, my old college notes, especially like for lecture classes, they were just like full of just abbreviations and like I was writing so fast, it was hard to read. So I had to like take my time reading it to make sure I know what I was talking about. So you gotta do what you gotta do. But I'm much faster at typing. But I didn't like being loud because sometimes like if you're typing fast, it gets really loud.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Next one, Marbury versus Madison continued. Later, the new president, President Jefferson's Secretary of State, James Madison, you may have heard of him, withheld some of these appointment letters. It's like, I don't want those jerks to have those jobs. So, one of these appointments, William Marbury filed suit in the Supreme Court for his job. He's like, hey, they told me I was supposed to have this job, but I never got my letter. Where is it? Sue. So, however, we see that Chief Justice Marshall knew that if he ordered Madison to deliver the letters, he would just ignore the court. He's like, well, if I, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, tells the president, you have to do this, and if he doesn't do it, I'll have no power ever again. They'll never listen to me. And in fact, really, who's to say that the one branch of the government has to listen? Like, who says the presidency actually has to listen to the to the Supreme Court? It's something we do, but it's something we do based on tradition. Tradition from this event here. So in 1803, Marshall said that they could not enforce laws such as the Judiciary Act of 1789 and declared it unconstitutional. So, by using the court to declare a law unconstitutional, he set precedents in a way he wanted instead of a way he didn't want. So Jefferson accepted this, creating the standards for judicial review for the rest of history. And so Jefferson won in the short term, but by ceding this right for the courts to review any law, constitutional or unconstitutional, without having to go through any process like that. Well, I mean, not any process, but like in such a full manner. And from here on out, Supreme Courts could do this. And so he also the president accepted that the court could rule against him. Could rule for or against Congress, therefore could also rule for or against him. So short-term gain, long-term loss for the presidency. Of course, that's one of those things you really couldn't go back on. I don't know. I guess you could, but that'd like be like going back on like hundreds of years of stuff. I'm going to definitely need to post this on the Google Classroom. Go ahead and download a PDF copy. Classroom, open up. Material. Oops. This keyboard's so messed up. Credit. I really should have made 2 Google Classroom classes because I keep finding that kids are doing work for the wrong class. And I don't turn it away. I count it as a bonus, but still, they're like working harder than they need to. They need to do the things that are just assigned for them. All right, so the notes are posted. Post the 3rd set because this is 2 out of 3 when we get to it after spring break. So we're all back that Monday, so we'll pick up with this then. Don't worry, you'll forget all this by then. All right, next one. So let's talk a little bit about President Thomas Jefferson. So Thomas Jefferson's vision. He was highly optimistic of America as a great land for prosperity and liberty. He wanted to steer America away from Hamilton's dream of a country of to a country of yeoman farmers. So going back all the way back to like that ideal Roman citizen back during the early Roman Republic, before it got terribly too corrupt. We're talking about like people like Cincinnatus, the Roman patrician who was even though he was born into nobility, he was still like a poor farmer, and he was called to be a leader to defend his nation, and he did so brilliantly, and could have been made king, but instead he put down his arms, he put down his robes of office, and went back to his little farm. And that's kind of like what people call President George Washington. Somebody who could have been king of America, but he put down those things and went back to his farm. Of course, I wouldn't say he had a little farm, but it was kind of like what you have to remember. Classical education was a big part of the founders' upbringing. They studied ancient Greece and Rome. Of course, they also studied ancient biblical heroes and things like that as well. So this was in their blood. Jefferson wished to make America the breadbasket of the world. He thought with all this vast land and so much of it, according to their opinion, left to waste, they thought that they could essentially turn much of America into farms and make a good deal of wealth through honest work. This is where the common man had his own farm, sold what he grew in the world market, so it was a free market idea, which would allow supply and demand to dictate success. Keep in mind, these are the people, the farmers, the Southerners, and the people in line with Thomas Jefferson who hate tariffs. Tariffs were a big thing back then. Artificially increasing the cost of goods was seen as bad to them. They thought that manufactured goods could just come from some other country. Let them worry about that. Cities and manufacturing could just bring corruption as far as they were concerned. However, he believed the nation faced 2 dangers as a republic. The first one, high population density. Large cities breed crime and corruption. This is an ancient Roman belief as well. In fact, ancient Romans for the longest time had laws against building buildings that were over like 3 stories high because they figured it made the population too dense and would breed crime and more corruption. Jefferson thought the same thing. the concentration of money into the hands of the few, which leads to political corruption. And so, yeah, his idea on how to do that was by, of course, moving towards more agricultural base. We're going to see, however, that being agricultural based and letting the money be spread out isn't going to work that well when you talk about the future of the plantation system, of slavery, and just how lucrative cotton can be. That's going to make a lot of the American South's money really go up to the hands of the top 5 or 7%. Then everybody else is not going to do that well. So there will be economic inequality because of that. But at this time, cotton wasn't that big of a deal. The slavery population wasn't nearly as big as it's going to be before the Civil War either. It was an issue. Jefferson actually, even though he owned slaves and he even fathered children through his slaves, he despised slavery. He in one of his letters, he wrote that slavery was like, it was like you had a wolf going for your throat. You were holding on to the ears. You didn't want to hold on to the ears, but you didn't want to let go either. He had no idea how we could reconcile people who grew up in slavery and actually have them be patriotic people. He didn't see how he could be because of just the resentment, you know? And so he didn't have an answer to the question. I think he played with the idea of resettling African people back in Africa, but that was definitely wasn't going to work out. So he knew it was a problem, couldn't do anything about it. It's going to take a big war for that.
Couldn't he do anything about it?
Well, maybe he could have, but I don't know. It was such an issue. I think people at this time were already willing to go to blood over it, and so it was like no thanks. It was such a big issue. The United States would not have been formed. The Constitution would not have been ratified if they tried to get rid of it right off the bat, or even put a deadline to actually get rid of it. Instead, they put a deadline to stop importation, and that was it. So, yeah. So Jefferson's vision continued. In order to bring this vision to life, Jefferson had his Treasury Secretary, Albert Galation, tear down Hamilton's economic structure. So it's like, hey, Hamilton, you worked hard on all this stuff. Let's get rid of that. The first thing to do was to make the nation debt-free by 1817. So make it solvent. Gallatin, began cutting the budget by closing embassies, reducing staff for the federal government, by stopping expensive parties for it wasn't the White House, but the presidential manor, and to cut the military in half. They're like, we're not exactly finding anybody over here, so let's go ahead and cut some of those troops. And remember, Napoleon wasn't a problem anymore. France wasn't a problem. So we weren't worried about that. And by shrinking the Navy from 25 to 7 ships. Now, this is going to work out well at first, but the British were still a bit of a problem for us. And so they're going to have a little bit of buyer's remorse for cutting the military by so much before the War of 1812. Part of these cuts were also to reduce the power of the Federalist Party by cutting their government jobs first. It's like, all right, we got 100 jobs here at the post office. We need to get rid of 50. If you're a Federalist, raise your hand. All right, y'all the first to go. Bye. So this aided Jefferson's idea to place responsibilities on the states and to reduce the federal presence. So if you remember, a literalist interpretation of the Constitution. If it doesn't say you can do this, you can't do it. Jefferson's going to back off of that eventually. But right now, he's like, we have the federal government doing things the Constitution didn't tell it to do. That's the states' jobs according to the 9th and the 10th Amendment. So there you go, states. Take care of your stuff. And that definitely is I mean, really, when you think about it, there's only two ways to balance a budget. You either bring in more cash or you spend less cash. And so he chose to spend less cash, not necessarily bring in more. Is this- When is the battle? Yeah, ready for the next one? I think I want to try to finish Jefferson's presidency today. And then we can come back in a couple weeks and talk about Madison, War of 1812, all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and go. All right. So, he's going to have more problems. He cuts the Navy, and there's pirates. I know. And that's one of the major things that the U.S. Navy does today. We have a huge Navy. They're not out necessarily fighting people, but just because of our worldwide naval presence, we actually prevent piracy from happening. So the Marbury pirates. So Morocco, you might remember, is a country in North Africa just across the ocean from Spain. It was kind of part of the old Ottoman Empire, and it kind of wasn't. It had its own independence. So what that means is that after, like, I don't know, the mid 16th century, you had the Battle of Lepanto, and Spain totally annihilated the Ottoman Navy, and it never recovered. Moroccans, however, did retain a lot of their naval forces. And they're going to turn to the old tradition of piracy, the way it had been for the Ottomans in the Mediterranean Sea. They board your boat, and if you were not one of those countries that paid bribes, well, if you fought back, they killed you. If you didn't fight back, they would enslave you unless somebody could pay a ransom, and they stole your stuff. So nobody wanted them to find you. Before Jefferson came into office, the United States government was paying a huge bribe, 1/5 of our whole federal budget at the time, to these Moroccan pirates. We were doing it because that's what they expected in order for us to have boats to trade there. The British did it. A lot of countries did it. They figured it was a lot cheaper and more safe than just fighting them, right? Jefferson and Gallatin decided to cut that and instead deploy our Navy. This became a national embarrassment, however, as we lost a ship named the Philadelphia. The crew was taken captive and ransomed. So, very, very old profession. You think back to the Middle Ages, taking people captive and ransoming them was like how you made money a lot of times. It's how a lot of knights made money and nobility. The whole idea was you kind of went into your seasonal warfare and sure. You played whack-a-mole on the peasants' heads because they didn't really matter to you. But whenever it came to somebody in fancy armor, you pretty much just wanted to capture them, bring them back to your estates, and write a fine letter to their house telling them that they need to pay up or you're not going to give them back. That's how you made money. I mean, you couldn't really tax peasants. They could only make money. They couldn't make money. They just gave you things in kind. The fighting dragged on until 1805, and peace was brokered And the hostages were freed for the price of $60,000 of back then money, which I'm sure was a lot, you know. So didn't quite work out. You can have the story of our Marines trying to make a good rescue attempt of these fellows who are going to march across the Moroccan desert. It's going to be some noble fighting, but it's not going to turn out that well. They're not going to be able to quite rescue them. And so that's why we had to pay the ransom. Right. Hey, here's another big thing that happened during Jefferson's presidency, the Louisiana Purchase. And this is where he's going to be like, oh, wow, wait a second. The Constitution doesn't say anything about buying land, but maybe we can make an exception here. Though the U.S. had rights to sail the Spanish Mississippi River, because Spain had this territory at the time, according to the Treaty of 1795, Spain ended up selling much of that land to France. And why? Well, I mean, Napoleon took over France, and then he made one of his brothers or his son, it might have been one of his brothers, like the King of Spain. He was really good about taking over places and then giving his family members like the crown. I think at this time, the Spanish king was actually in Mexico for a while as a refugee. So Jefferson sent James Monroe to talk to the British about a potential military alliance and Robert Livingston to France. Livingston was authorized to spend up to $2 million in order to buy just New Orleans and as much land as possible. So he's like, well, we want to see if we can still sail up and down the Mississippi River, and we really would love to have that port city down at the tail end of it. That would give us good ocean access. And rivers and water, the ocean was how you transported goods back then. It was really expensive to transport large, heavy amounts of freight by using animals. There were no choo-choo trains. There were no cars. There were no airplanes. So going by water was the only cost-effective way to do it. Napoleon, however, lost interest in Americas and wished to finance a war in Europe instead. So he offered all of France's land in America for only $15 million. That was a big chunk of land. It doubled the size of the United States of America. We didn't know what was there. He didn't know what was there either. It was only like, wasn't that long ago, was his name LaSalle even sailed down the Mississippi River all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, where we find New Orleans. So, yeah, it was a mysterious place, but there was a lot of it. It was so uncharted. France and Spain didn't necessarily even know where the French territory ended. So, now, I think Napoleon gave his son Italy. I don't think so. I think his brother or sister got Spain.
So they all got screwed.
Well, I mean, yeah, the locals did. Thing is, though, his family weren't quite up to his standard. They weren't like known for being like really good at governing or intelligent. So they were just kind of fops. They were just there, just lived the royal lifestyle the best they knew how, which didn't really help them stay in power after Napoleon left. So. All right, next one. Beep, 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 beep.
Transition.
Oops. Okay. Yeah, I know. Horrible. All right. So Jefferson was overjoyed by this unexpected news. It's like, wow, I sent you down there for like a small little thing and you gave me all this. I love you. However, the Constitution had no provisions for adding new land. Oops. Unperturbed, Jefferson submitted the purchase to Congress for ratification as a treaty. He's like, we'll just do it as a treaty. Constitution says stuff about treaties. So in November of 1803, winning an overwhelming majority, people were like, wow, we got all of this. We didn't even have a war or anything. This deal brought three major benefits to America. One, this removed one European power from our continent, France. They're like, that's one less country to worry about. Two, it secured the whole Mississippi River for America's shipping and transport. They're like, wow, we don't even have to have permission to sail down it. We just get to. And three, the purchase doubled the size of the U.S. So that's a pretty good stuff, $15 million. I don't know how much that was per acre, but just amazing amount of land. And Napoleon really didn't want to do a lot in America. He had some pretty bad experiences down in the Caribbean, sending his troops down, I think, against Haiti. And Haiti is the only country to have a fully successful slave revolt. They managed to throw off the shackles and form their own country and get rid of their slaveholders. But the thing is, since most countries still had slavery in this part of the world, they were a pariah. And so no country recognized their sovereignty and ignored them. And so as far as like education and resources and trade, it had been a third world country ever since. Even a lot of people there, they had such crude farming methods. It's even to this day, it's been so overfarmed, it's completely deforested. There's not even grass throughout much of it. And so that's why a lot of its topsoil washed away. I mean, the other side of the island is the Dominican Republic, and it's like beautiful, lush, like jungle and tropical and all this other stuff. So it just goes to show how you can really destroy your environment, especially if you get rid of that topsoil. So sad stuff. I'm going to pause it so you don't look at the nasty transition.
That's the transition.
It was too far. Okay. Hey, but here we go. I actually had I forgot the name of the author. I was told it's a really good Lewis and Clark book recommended to me. I should read it. Just talking about like all the crazy things they had to go through, like barely escaping death over and over again, just like miraculously. So Lewis and Clark, 1803, Jefferson got a secret appropriation from Congress, that's cash, to finance an exploratory mission into the new territory. So he sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark as leaders of the Corps of Discovery. Their mission was to pretend, though it was to conduct a scientific mission, though they did realistically take notes, pictures, and samples. They very carefully weighed out and planned all these things, what they would do. And note the number of foreign entities in the area. So they were also there kind of trying to figure out where the Spanish were. So, and the number and condition of Indians in the area, and to make contact with them, and to chart the lands and waterways. So that's also to cartography, to make maps. So they're trying to build relations, spy a little bit, get some flora, fauna, and some of the wildlife, at least like skins and stuff like that.
Skins.
Try to see if they can do any kind of surveying to see if they can see any useful resources, to make a map, see if they can find the Northwest Passage maybe, and figure out what's on. If you go far enough, do you find anything? After setting off, they befriended a French trapper named Carbonu, I think that's how you say it, and his Shoshone wife, Sacagawea. They were able to communicate to most of the tribes in the area. And so, she knew a lot of the languages around there. Her tribe was actually pretty far west. And she was sold as a slave to this French trapper, but eventually they married. And the whole time she goes pregnant, and then she delivers the baby, and then she brings the baby with them. Miraculously, she actually comes across her brother after being separated for like a decade. And so they're going to meet all kinds of tribes. They're going to get into a couple of scuffles, but nothing serious. It's mostly going to be very peaceful. They're going to have one of the world's, they're kind of rare and they're expensive, but they actually had a semi-automatic rifle. It was actually an air gun you could fill up with a high pressure air tank, and it could shoot multiple rounds at once. So they needed that because they were so low in their manpower. They had to hunt every day. Most of what they ate was simply meat that they found. Yeah. So they make it all the way to the Pacific by 1805. And there, they're going to make it back after that and let Jefferson know all about all this stuff. So yeah, it was. They had to bring a lot of supplies. It was down to the detail. A lot of the waterways they couldn't make it across. They would literally have to clear a path and drag their boat across the land to the next waterway. Had a dog with them.
Yeah, dog.
They probably ate the
Oh,
dog.
dog.
A hot dog.
Sir,
What did she say about that?
yeah, what'd you say?
She gotta come back in the house.
What happened to Mariah anyway? She go home?
You were spoiled.
I don't know.
I saw her talking to someone in the cafeteria. But
Tell her I'm sorry.
Good.
She went
I didn't even think about it. Everybody
All
went,
right, 41 minutes. Let's see. All right.
there's not much left.
Hey, oh, there you go. There's a little map of their path. So they start at St. Louis, travel up, trying to follow waterways, as you can see. Meet several tribes.
What's the gray area?
That's going to be that territory that's kind of in dispute, whether it's ours or the British. And we have an agreement, or at least I think it's during this time. It might be a little afterwards, like in Oregon, where we and the British both agree that we both agree that we're not quite sure who owns it. So we also both agree that we will not purposefully send settlers, and we will not build forts on these territories. But we're going to see later on, though, is that Americans will wind up going there, especially Methodist, and they're just going to stay as missionaries and then build towns. And then the British are like, "Hey, what are you doing there?" "Well, we're staying." And we're like, "Oh, okay, we're not going to war over it." So they kind of let us have it. So yes.
We just conquered that Spanish territory, right?
That's a lot.
well, they seceded, and through their own revolution, these guys right here tried to get these guys to join in, but they wound up fighting back against us. And then we joined America. Mexico got super mad about that, so then we had a war about it. And yeah, we got all this stuff. Woo. So we most certainly will get to the Mexican-American War. I'm not sure how detailed we can go over the Texas Revolution considering our time. But that's one thing. The Americas is just full of stories of secession. But American secession usually ends in bloodshed. Some countries, though, do secede and have relatively little bloodshed here and there.
Are we gonna get to like the Great Plains pioneers?
A little bit. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the expansion west, but it's kind of like a generality. You know what I'm saying? So, all right, we'll just call this the last one for the day. I don't think we're going to. We got a few more to go through for Jefferson, but we can save that for after spring break. So, problems with neutrality. So, remember, Washington's like, let's be neutral. But those pesky Europeans sure make it hard to stay out of their fights. America profited greatly from the wars in Europe. It's kind of like what we did before World War I, World War II. We were selling things to the belligerents, and they got. You can't make both sides happy, but you can make both sides mad. From 170. Wait, what? What is that sentence? What did I put there? I think it was like from 1700 to 1807, the value of American shipping grew
So,
$5.9 million.
Should we put 1700 instead of?
We put the 1700s. I messed that up. That could have been 1790 for all I know. Yeah, it's in my notes. I'd have to go back and look at my notes to fix it. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but you can see that it increased from $5.9 million to $42.1 million. The value of our shipping, our commerce, our foreign trade. Britain and France began to tire of American neutrality. Britain began boarding American ships and impressing anyone who had ever been a British citizen. So we're making all this money selling things like corn and wheat, lumber and tar.
Is it oppressing or impressing?
Impressment is whenever you kidnap somebody and make them join your military, right? So this was a problem during the American Revolution. The British would do this, and there were stories of people who lived along the Atlantic coast, and they're there farming their field, and next thing you know, some British redcoats nab you up, hit you on the head, and you wake up on board of a ship with chains
Climbing
on
in your
you.
windows,
And they-
snatching your people up.
Yeah, well, it's exactly. But here, they say they deemed that unless you could prove otherwise, you were a British citizen, and they had the right to make you work in the King's Navy. It was like the draft, and so these people would just be on a British boat and never see home again. Napoleon enacted at the same time something called the Berlin Decree on November of 1806, which authorized his navy to seize British goods on any boat, to seize any boat, to search it, and take things that they thought were going to the British. And so we have both sides of the war are like, yes, sell to us, but eventually it's going to turn into you can only sell to us, and if you sell to our enemy, it's war, and we're going to get caught in the middle of that. So if you help my enemy, that means war. So, folks, that's going to end it for today. All right. So we're going to pick back up after spring break on the 15th and finish Jefferson, and then we're going to start a little guy called Madison and the War of 1820. So see you later.
Goodbye.
Yeah.